Um, and I don't know if you could just hear that, but we're going to be recording this meeting and then sending it out afterwards. So you will be able to see everything recorded. For the time being, I'm going to mute everyone so that way there's no feedback or anything like that. But there will be times where there's going to be some questions just to make it a little bit interactive. So when there are questions, don't worry, I will unmute you all so you don't have to worry about pressing any buttons or anything like that. Um, but so I am very excited that you are all here. We're excited to be launching this training series. This is a brand new idea that we had, and so we're just kind of, excited to be starting something new. So for everyone that doesn't know me, my name is Amelia, and I am the field director with the Kathy Ellis campaign. I've been with the campaign now, I think, for about 2 months. And so this idea really came out of trying to further Kathy's mission and the mission of all of our staff, which is, to give the people of the 8th District and really all of Missouri the tools and the resources to be able to fight for the issues that you all care about, regardless of if this campaign existed or not. So whether that's working with groups like the Sierra Club, Planned Parenthood, Moms Demand Action, I know people on this call are involved with a lot of those organizations. We want to make sure that you all feel empowered to lead your own campaigns and lead your own fights. And the only way we do that is if we have more folks trained in how to make these kinds of changes. So that's really where this idea came out of. And, we're starting everything fresh. This is all an experiment. So we also totally welcome feedback. If you guys get through this and you say, hey, we really want a training on this topic that we don't currently have listed, we're also super flexible to expanding this or changing this based on the needs of the people who want to attend. So this is the first one. We're going to be doing 5, and over the next few weeks, we'll be going over the basics and the tools we use to help us on the campaign trail. So this one is actually, we decided to start off by doing one that had nothing to do with technology, but this is just going to be the basics of how to have an organizing conversation. Because that's really the most fundamental part of any campaign or any issue that we fight for. So even if you have all the tech and the advertising and the money in the world, if you don't know how to have these kinds of conversations and you don't know how to, change people's hearts and minds, then it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to use those tools effectively. So we'll keep coming back to these techniques as we go along in the future weeks and go along with the technology, but this is going to be the basics that we use. And so we thought this was really a good jumping off point and a good place to start. So also just one disclaimer I want to add, these trainings are definitely not the end all be all of any of this. If you are excited about any of this, I totally recommend you to look up other resources. My background is in labor organizing, so a lot of the work that I do is informed by that, but I'm sure people who come from different areas might have different perspectives on this. So I'm here to give you everything that I know, but definitely feel free to continue to learn on your own because, like I said, I'm by no means an exhaustive resource of every organizing tool in the book, and I still definitely make mistakes a lot of times myself. So, hopefully we can all learn from each other as well. And if you have an experience that you think would be great for the group to hear, we're hoping to make these a little interactive, so hopefully we can all learn from each other's experiences. So now I'm going to share my screen with you all. So you don't have to just, like I said, you don't just have to all stare at my face for the next hour or so. So this is a little PowerPoint that I put together that hopefully you all will be able to see. So like I said, this is organizing training series. The first one is about the organizing conversation, sort of 101. So we're going to start by just going over, there's a lot, I don't know if you guys can hear the siren in the background. I live near a fire station, so it's unfortunate. But so we're going to start off by just going over some of the terms that we use in these kinds of conversations. So that way we're kind of all on the same page and you guys understand what I mean when I say certain things. So, really the first one, the most important one is, what is organizing? It's a big, lofty term that people like to throw around a lot, but they actually often don't know how to do it. I know when I started, I was like, oh yeah, I want to be an organizer, but I had no idea what that means because it's a very sort of nebulous word. You can also probably spend a whole series just talking about this and what organizing is, so we won't be able to cover it all, but these are hopefully the basics that you'll need. So to me, when I think about my definition, of what organizing is, I think about organizing as mobilizing people to take collective action. So, we have lots of people all sort of doing their own thing, but when we organize, we can get everyone all on the same page doing the same work and the same thing. Um, but if you want to look at definitions from people a little bit more experienced than me, Fred Ross is an incredibly famous organizer from the 20th century, worked with Cesar Chavez and things like that. And he wrote that organizing is providing people with the opportunity to become aware of their own capabilities and potential. And I really like this because, at the end of the day, we're all organizers and we're all organized every single day of our lives. But so often we think, oh, I can't do anything. I'm just a little old fish in this very big pond and I can't really do very much. But the reality is that you can do a whole lot. And when we organize, we empower people to take action and make change themselves and not rely on anyone else. So organizing is really about just showing people their own power. And I really like that definition. But so, we all know that one person can't make big structural change alone. None of us are going to change the whole healthcare system or the education system. So it takes a lot of people working together, and organizing is the way to make that happen. Organizing allows us to, again, come together collectively to figure out how do we all move forward and how do we, make this world a little bit better. And so I had a quick question here to ask everyone, which is, does anyone else have any ideas of what organizing is or anything that they would kind of like to add to these? And so I'm going to unmute everyone. And yeah, so does anyone have any ideas of what they think organizing might be or how they've organized in the past? Don't everyone jump up at
Um,
once.
well, I don't necessarily have experience in organizing things like this, but I am involved with Moms Demand Action, who seem to have their stuff together and are very organized in every you know activity I've done with them. So they're a very impressive organization. So
Yeah, there's some really great work, and I know, yeah, there's quite a few people on here, I think, who have been involved with Moms Demand Action, and that's a great example of, how did that organization start? It was moms coming together, saying that we are not going to continue to allow gun violence to affect our families, right? So this was people who were just everyday people who came together with a mission, and they've now built this national organization. So I think that's a really great example of how everyone is really an organizer and has the capabilities to make change. Okay, so to continue on, um, so what is the organizing conversation? So the organizing conversation um, is kind of the basic structured conversation where we move someone to take action. We have conversations every single day, so we all know how to have a conversation, but the organizing conversation has a structure, and it's how we're trying to get someone to be a part of a movement, be a part of our plan. Uh, and so every conversation you have someone about your issue can be an organizing conversation. It can be a conversation where you take someone from not taking action to doing something in the direction of whatever the issue is that you are trying to change. So even conversations you have with someone you run into at the grocery store or a conversation you have around a dinner table, you can think about these structures in just your everyday life and think about how am I taking someone who might care about an issue, who might be frustrated by an issue, and move them to take an action to change that. And it helps you meet your goals for change because we all know you got to have goals, right?
I have.
Your goal might be getting 1,000 signatures on a petition. Your goal might be getting a representative to vote a certain way on a bill. And so these organizing conversations are kind of the building blocks to meet those goals because if you need 100 people to sign something or to show up at an event, you're going to need to ask in all of your conversations for people to take that action. So those are really just, structured conversations. And then the next thing is, what does it mean to take action? So this is a pretty self-explanatory one, and it can happen in lots of different ways. There's smaller actions, there's bigger actions, and each campaign and each movement that you're all involved in will decide what is appropriate for each step of the campaign. But really, it's just people feel a lot of things. People are frustrated. I'm sure we all have seen the conversations on Facebook of people getting really, worked up about certain issues, which is great. But it's one thing to just be frustrated and to want change. It's another thing to actually do something actionable to make that happen. So, certain examples are calling your representative, attending an event, going on strike if you're in a union, having a conversation with your neighbor. Those are all examples of taking action in totally different ways. And some of them can take 5 minutes, some of them can take months, but we take action all the time. And it's basically just saying, I am frustrated by something and I'm going to do something about it, as opposed to just letting that frustration kind of sit with me. Um, so I know all of you, at least with Kathy's campaign and all of these other things, have taken action. So what are some examples that you guys can think of actions that you have taken or that you have been really impressed by? I don't know if anyone wants to share from their personal experience.
Well, I know for our Indivisible Heart of the Ozarks, we do get frustrated a lot, and we have taken actions by having demonstrations like on the town square, and then individually we have taken actions on calling our representatives and senators.
Yeah, that's a really great one. Yeah, like in your town, standing in your town square or whatever it may be, that's a really great form of taking action. Is there anyone
Uh-huh.
else who wants to share?
Yeah,
I
this is Aaron Lerma, by the way. Uh, say so like being an organizer, we talk a lot about like taking action and that sort of thing. Um, and I think what has been super, super helpful for me is that finding out, that there's actually there can be a strategy to taking action that we base a lot of our organizing at Planned Parenthood off of the Midwest Academy handbook and or organizing, and they have a strategy chart that allows you to kind of see what your breakdown, like what your goals are, the resources that you have, the things that you want, and then really kind of fill in at the end, your targets and your tactics, and that has been super super helpful for me in taking action and talking with either volunteers or explaining that strategy chart and thing. It becomes a really useful tool. One of a really good example was last year during the abortion ban bill that got passed in Missouri. We had thousands of people that showed up in St. Louis to take action, and there were like 16 people that took action in a civil disobedience manner. So they had actually blocked off like one of the state buildings, and it was a good tactic that it didn't quite achieve our goal, but we were able to create a visibility that kind of said, that we are here and we're watching. So I think that always keeping in mind like that strategy of like because sometimes we get stuck in some tactics, and it's like, what are some new tactics that may help us achieve our goal? Whether we're in rural Missouri and we can't make it to the city, like what are some things we can do in our small communities that could make a bigger impact than maybe what we're used to?
Yeah, I think that's really a great example. And that also kind of shows one of the other things, which is talking about having a strategy, right? Because you don't want to start with your first action being the most extreme thing you can do, right? We always talk about escalation in organizing. So, your first step might be, okay, let's send a letter saying that we're unhappy with something. Okay, and then if they don't respond to our letter, let's step up our game. Maybe let's host a march outside of the office, right? And then maybe if that doesn't work, then you go to civil disobedience, right? So kind of like what Aaron was saying, there's totally strategies to help you figure out what kind of action is appropriate for, the things that you're trying to do. And so, yeah, resources like you said, Midwest Academy, are really great places to figure out what are the best actions for my organization to take or my group to take. And yeah, and always get creative, I think is a really great point. And I saw Janet, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Amelia? Okay.
Yes.
I found another way that's really helped me is just getting fellow uh, organizers together. Maxine is on this call, and we often had meetings that were regional because we all felt like we were out there alone, and there is strength in numbers, and we've been able to develop this network. So for me, organizing the network is really instrumental to us being able to achieve a lot of our goals.
Yeah, especially in a place like the 8th District, right, where people are so spread out and people live hours away, finding ways to build community is hugely important. So, I think that's also one of the amazing things about Kathy's campaign as well, and you all being a part of it, is that we have all these amazing organizers and activists across the state and across the district that are now coming together and saying, yeah, let's work together. So I think that's a really incredible example. So that's great to hear, and those were all some really wonderful examples. So now we're going to continue on to the organizing conversation, the whole reason we're here, what this whole thing is about. And this is really where we get into sort of the nitty-gritty and the different sections of what makes up an organizing conversation. So for me, there's 4 parts. The first part is getting the story, and we're going to delve into all these in more detail. But the first part is getting the story, learning about the person you're talking with. The second is agitation, getting them worked up, getting them to feel like, yeah, I can't take this anymore. Why have I been putting up with this? Why is this the way that things are? Just getting them agitated and emotional about whatever it is that you're talking about. 3 is the vision. So you've got this issue, you're frustrated, you're mad, and then you provide this vision for how we make it better. Something that's actually going to take us from being and having this problem to solving this problem. And then 4 is taking action, what we just talked about. So we have this vision that culminates in a step you can take right now to move us along in this path and move us towards a better future. And so some organizing conversations do have more parts based on the kind of organizing you're doing. So you might know some other parts that we won't be talking about here. But I think that with these 4 sections, that these are kind of the most crucial in my experience and can serve as a foundation for any organizing conversation. So first is getting the story. And this is pretty basic, and these are skills that you all already have and use in your everyday life. But the first thing that I think is most counterintuitive, or at least it was to me when I started, is that listening is the most important. And a lot of people have this rule, they call it the 70-30 rule, which is that you should be listening 70% of the time and talking 30% of the time. And so to me, this was counterintuitive because when I first started, my instinct was just, if I told someone everything they needed to know, all the facts and why this was important and all of this stuff, then of course they're going to agree with my point of view, right? Because I learned and I researched and I'm going to give you all these facts that I know are right, so you're going to agree with me. But as I'm sure you know from your experiences, that's not actually how it works, and I learned that, sometimes the hard way. And we know that bombarding people with facts and figures is not likely to persuade them to join your cause. Because unfortunately, people don't always listen to those facts and figures. And the reality is that most people are motivated by self-interest. And so the way that you're going to be able to motivate someone to do something is if you understand what is in their self-interest, what they care about. And so you have to understand what someone's story is. And that might take, you can go on and take a whole day to do that, or you might have to do that very quickly, and that depends on kind of the limitations of what your organizing looks like. But so in order to get people's stories, we need to ask open-ended questions, because we want people talking. If we're supposed to be listening 70% of the time, we got to ask them questions that's going to get them talking about their life. And again, you do this every day when you talk to your family, your coworkers, your neighbors. So it's a skill that you all are already equipped with. But so, for this beginning part, I'm going to use an example of running a campaign, say around higher education and like the student debt crisis. So, I can ask someone, do you have student debt? Well, that's a yes or no question, right? So I'm going to get yes or no. Okay, great. Well, at least I know that. But that didn't really encourage them to kind of open up and give me more detail. So once I know if they have student debt, well, I might want to get them talking a little bit more. So I might ask them a question like, how does your student debt impact your ability to plan for your future, right? So that's a question that now that's a big, lofty question that they can spend a lot of time talking about. And from there, I'm going to learn more about them. Do they want to buy a house and they can't buy a house because they've got $100,000 in student debt? Maybe they think that they're just never going to have kids because they've got too much debt weighing on them and, they've just given up on that dream. So by asking those open-ended questions, you give people the opportunity to really share what's on their minds and what's the most important to them. And so it's really important to kind of frame questions. Whenever you think about a question, think about if it can be answered in a yes or no way. And if it can, try and rephrase it to be more open-ended so that people can kind of get talking. So you do need to ask some fact-based questions, right? Like, it's not that they all have to be these crazy lofty questions, but you don't want to just be saying, okay, do you have student debt? Yes, no. Okay, how much student debt? 100,000. Great, what school did you go to, right? Those are very basic questions that kind of make it very back and forth. It doesn't allow conversation to flow. So you really want to try and open it up and get people talking a lot more. And don't be afraid to go deep with people. And this is, again, part of the conversation that is counterintuitive to a lot of the narratives that we're taught about politeness and propriety and all of that stuff. And so, I think the thing people often have the hardest time with is asking personal questions because we're taught, right? Oh, don't ask people that you don't know personal questions. I know my mom always taught me it's rude to ask people about money or about salary, right? Those are very common things. But the fact is that we're only going to have these conversations if we delve into areas that aren't, quite polite society kind of questions. We have to push past what is normal to get to what is real because we normalize so many crazy situations in this country. We normalize the fact that people are living paycheck to paycheck. We normalize the fact that people don't have health care and have to put up a GoFundMe to fund basic surgeries. So, we have to break past what's normal to get to what's real. And there's ways to ask those questions that aren't rude or off-putting. Really it's just about being empathetic, and listening deeply, right? If I ask you, oh, hey, how you doing today? You're probably going to say, oh, I'm good. How are you, right? But then if I ask again and I say, like, really, how are you doing? And I change my tone, I change my demeanor, I ask again, even that simple change of tone is going to get someone from saying, oh, yeah, I'm fine, things are good, to saying, actually, I've had a pretty rough day at work, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. So this is really a section where tone is very important. And don't be afraid to go deep because that's really what's going to teach you what motivates people. And if you learn that someone's student debt is crushing them so much that they're not going to be able to have kids, they think that they're never going to be able to have kids, that's a huge motivating factor for why they want to change this as opposed to they just say, oh yeah, student debt, it really sucks, I hate paying all that money, right? That's a totally different conversation. And you'd be surprised what people will tell you when you ask them these kinds of questions because we don't get the opportunity to talk about this. Again, it's because it's not polite, people don't often ask these questions, and so we don't often get to talk about what's weighing on us. So you would be surprised what people will open up to you with when they see that you are someone who wants to listen, someone who is empathetic, someone who cares about these issues. I'll just give one example. When I was a union organizer, we would do unannounced house visits to talk to people off of the work site. So I'd basically just show up at someone's door, introduce myself, and ask to come in and talk about their life in the union. And I did get some doors slammed in my face, but otherwise I would have these conversations where within an hour of meeting this person, they were telling me about like their serious illnesses, how they couldn't afford to send their kids to college, how they were worried about losing their house, like really serious stuff. And it wasn't that difficult to get to that place because they had just never been asked these questions and it's still really weighing on them. So if you are there and you're willing to listen, people will tell you a lot. And if you're the kind of person that's doing this work, chances are you're a really good listener and chances are you're someone who really cares and you want to help them solve these issues. You want to help them, not have to live with these fears. So don't be afraid to go deep. It can be kind of tough. It can be scary at first, but just be an empathetic and open person and just foster that kind of warm conversation. And that's typically, some really good ways to get people to open up to you. So I'm going to stop here real quick because I know I just said a lot and just check in to see if there are any questions that people have about kind of this portion of getting the story. Also, if you can't talk or you can't unmute yourself, you can also, oh, look, see, I see someone in the chat has typed something. Okay, but anyways, yeah, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and I will get to them as we go along. So if we don't have any questions, I'm going to keep going. So the next section is agitation. So once we know about this person, we know a little bit more about their story, we want to get them riled up. We want to get them ready to fight and to make some change, right? So in this section, you still want to be, asking open-ended questions, but you want to kind of change these questions to convert this negative emotion into energy, right? They might be feeling a little bit of despair. They might be feeling sadness. When you're asking someone about serious issues, it's typically not the happiest conversation. But so if we just let that lie there, then that doesn't turn into action. That just turns into like despair, right? Oh man, yeah, the world sucks. What are we going to do about it, right? So this is a section where you take that and you say, yes, the world does suck, but let's move forward and let's change something. And so, we want to help people see the cause of the issue in this conversation, right? Because a lot of people don't see the structural issues of why things are the way they are. So we want to start asking questions about, well, why are things like this? You told me you have $100,000 of student debt. Why do you think students are drowning in debt in this country right now, right? We want to get them thinking about, this is an issue, but this is an issue that has a cause, and we can solve that cause if we work together. And so, we want to ask questions that unmask the reality of the situation. Because also we know that some people have some misguided views about maybe what's going on, right? When we think about maybe people who support certain political figures, right? When they look at the cause of things, they say, oh, it's the immigrants. The immigrants are the problem, right? But if you start to ask questions like, okay, so you tell me that your house is being foreclosed on, right? Why is that the case? Why are you getting paid $15, probably not, $12 an hour? Who makes the decisions about you getting paid $12 an hour? Do you think it's fair that you're only making $12 an hour? And when you ask those kinds of questions, it starts to get people to think, like, seriously, yeah, why am I getting paid $12 an hour? Who makes that decision? Is it my boss? No, it's probably not your boss. Maybe it's someone higher than that. If you work for some place like Walmart or Amazon, right? Who's making that kind of decision? Also, why is our minimum wage so low? And it starts to get people to think about all the structural issues that are causing them to be in these precarious situations. And that gets people mad, They say, yeah, you're right. This is unfair. Why am I only getting paid $12 an hour? Or why is it that I had to pay $100,000 to go to a public university in my state, or whatever it may be? Another good tip that I've learned is just to repeat, this isn't even a question, but just to repeat shocking parts of a story back to someone. So if someone tells you, yeah, I had to put up a GoFundMe to pay for my cancer treatments, like that's a really crazy reality that so many people in this country face every single day, that we, again, just kind of, it's normal. It's part of our everyday life. And so, even for people who have health care through their employer. So just repeating back to them, like, wow, you had to put up a GoFundMe. That sounds really tough. That's how you had to pay for your surgery, or you had to pay for your cancer treatment, right? And sometimes just those people have, again, they've normalized it just to get through the day. They can't think about the fact that it is such a terrible situation. And so when someone says it back to them and they hear it coming from someone else, that can, again, wake people up and be like, yeah, you're right. I can't normally think about it because it's so tough. But when you repeat it back to them, they can hear it. They hear the story a little bit differently than the story that they've just told themselves in their head. And so that's a great way to just remind people, yeah, you're right. This is a really tough situation that you're in, and you shouldn't have to be in that situation. And so, we just want to help create a narrative that is easy to follow. You have an issue, right? And that issue has a cause, and that causes the government, that causes your representative, that causes your employer, whatever it is, right? But we often don't think about these causes. We just think about the issue and how much it sucks. But if there's not a cause to these issues, then there's nothing to fight against. So we have to help people see in this section that there is a cause to what's going on, and that's a cause that we can fight against. It has a face, it has a name, because when it's faceless and it's nameless, there's nothing we can do about it. So in this part of the conversation, we want to help people see that, so that way we have a target for our campaign, we have a target for our energy and for our emotion. So yeah, this is agitation. Does anyone have any questions about that or any thoughts that they want to add? I'm just going to check the chat box real quick.
No, I don't want to add to it. I just want to mention that what you had said about that makes sense. I never really thought about it in those terms, and especially the fact that a lot of times people use other people for scapegoats rather than their representatives or their boss or the government or whatever. And that's good to try and bring it back to that and say it to them in those terms.
Yeah. And, again, with whatever campaign oh, go ahead. Sally, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was part of the petition for the getting Medicaid onto our ballot in November, and I just because I felt so passionate about it, I just kind of went around my neighborhood, and I knew that there were some doors that I knocked on that these people did not vote the same way I did in the last election, but I still knocked on that door, and I'm telling you, we had some really seriously nice conversations. This issue of healthcare is something that everybody, at least in my neighborhood, can get on board with. So that I know will be a good jumping off spot for me, so.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point that you brought up too, Sally, that, so many issues that we talk about in this country right now have really gotten into this divide. You're either a Republican or you're a Democrat, right? And you fall on one of these two spectrums. We know in the 8th district, that's a much more complicated dynamic, right? And that people a lot of times vote for progressive issues, but then, don't support the candidates who might also believe in those sorts of things. So these conversations too help get people thinking, okay, let's take away the word Republican and Democrat for a second, and let's just talk about this issue and what is really at stake with this issue. What's happening with this? How is this impacting your life? And then once you have that story and you can point to this person and say, yeah, I know that you're really struggling with this, then it's easier because you've broken it down to this person's life, their experience. Then it's easier to tie that to a candidate and say, okay, like you say you need health care. Well, let me show you the reality that this candidate, Jason Smith, is not the candidate that is voted to support that. And this other candidate, Kathy Ellis, is the kind who would give you the things that you need, would help to empower you, and that's just one example, but that applies to any of your campaigns. So yeah, I think the 8th district is a really unique area, and that's why these conversations and really focusing on each individual's experience is so crucial, because we know that these terms, Republican, Democrat, can get, it's complicated down in the 8th district.
Very complicated in the 8th district.
Yes, exactly. So to move on to our next section, so the next is when, we kind of take over a little bit as organizers. So the first two sections, we were asking a lot of questions, right? We want to get these people talking. But this is where we kind of switch it up, and we offer the vision for change. We say, this is the issue we've been having, this is what's wrong, and this is how we change it. So there's a plan to win, and that's what we need to show them, that someone, maybe it's not you specifically, but someone has thought about a plan to figure this out. Because again, sometimes these things can feel so lofty that people are like, there's no point in me trying because we're never gonna get it, right? It's too big to fix the healthcare problem. It's too big to fix any of these issues. So you need to show them, actually, there is a plan, and it's very actionable, and you can be a part of this plan. And so this is where you kind of talk a little bit more because you're offering them that example, and it's helpful. Organizers will call it the wrap. Kind of, I don't know if it comes from wrapping or wrapping paper. I don't really know where that term was invented, but people often call it the wrap. And it's like your short little statement that you use every single time, and it's good to kind of practice it in the mirror. where you explain to them what the plan is. Because the most important thing in this section is that you keep it to the 3 C's, which is you want to be clear, you want to be concise, and you want to be concrete. Unlike me talking for an hour, this is not concise by any means. You want to do the opposite of me, and you want to be clear, concise, and concrete. Because people lose focus, they lose attention really easily, we know that. And so if you drag on and on and on with a 10-minute plan, you're going to lose this person. They're going to get lost in the weeds, they're going to get confused. So you want to keep it short and sweet, and you want to keep it concrete. You want to give them clear examples. You don't want to talk big, nebulous, we're going to save the world by doing this. No, you want to give them real examples and say, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to get these signatures. We're going to go here. We're going to do this. And you want to be clear. You want to explain it as clearly as possible. So I have an example real quick when I think about our own campaign here in Cathyland. So a vision that I would offer for someone who is concerned about student debt is Kathy Ellis is running to represent Missouri's 8th District. As our representative, she will be able to fight for federal legislation that will make community college debt-free so that students don't have to choose between building their future and financial freedom, right? So that's 2 sentences, very quick. And in that, the first part, we have Kathy Ellis is running to represent Missouri's 8th District. So it's very clear what the plan is. This is the plan. We got to elect this awesome lady to Congress. And it's a very concrete plan as well. And then in the second section, again, it's a concrete example of what Kathy's going to do. So I'm not saying, oh yeah, Kathy, she's gonna fix student debt. It's gonna be great. No, I'm giving them a real example so they can see that there is a plan. Community college, we're gonna make it debt-free. So they see again that it's actionable. They see that it's a real plan. Someone has thought this through, and that's gonna make people more likely to join on because they know that there's a pathway to victory. And so each vision will be different based on the kind of campaign you're working on. But another good thing, you can highlight any victories to showcase the progress you've already made, the next goal you'll have, and how you'll do it. So if you can say, I work with X organization, we fought to expand Medicaid in the state of Missouri, and we want to go ahead and do that on a federal level. If people can see that you already won something, you already had a victory, you want to highlight that. So they can say, oh yeah, these people are serious and they know what they're doing. Because if someone's already won, it gives you a better feeling. So in this vision, we're really drawing a clear line between this person's issue and how this vision will help alleviate this issue. So we really want to be clear in, you said you're struggling with this, well, this is how we're going to fix it. And we're being as concise as possible while still giving them all the details they need. That way they don't get lost and can focus on the big details that matter. Obviously, if there's follow-up questions, you can answer those, but you don't want to give them the whole 10-minute or hour-long presentation because you have just a few sentences to get that person on board. So it's really important to give people a strong vision because that's what's going to make them believe that being a part of whatever it is that you're talking about will actually bring about change. So this is kind of your moment. This is your moment to shine and say, come join us. And so I'm going to go into the next section and then we'll do any more questions afterwards. But the vision leads right into taking action. So this is the last section, but to me, it's the most important section because this is where we take someone from maybe not doing anything to doing something, which is the most important thing that we do as an organizer. So at this point, we've gotten someone's story, we know that they're agitated, and we've given them a vision. And so we need to make a strong ask of this person. We need to give them a question and say, this is what we need you to do. And by giving them that question, we want to give them a very specific task. So you want to, again, practice this question in the mirror, whatever it is that you're going to do, because we want to have one that's you're going to say it the same every time, and it's going to be very specific. It's going to be actionable, right? Because if you think about it this way, if I say to you, hey, do you want to hang out soon? We all have had that happen to us in our lives. It's probably not going to happen, right? Because it's really vague. There's no course of action. And, someone says, oh, yeah, sure, we should hang out. We should get coffee soon, right? And then you never get coffee. That's the never-ending question. Whereas if I say to you, hey, do you want to go see the new movie with me on Friday at 7 at the theater on Main Street? I'm giving you a very specific question that you can say yes or no to, right? But then you see, oh, hey, like this person has a plan, and I want to be a part of that plan. I want to go see a movie with this person. And it's much easier for you to be able to say, yes, I'm going to be a part of that plan, or no, I'm not going to be a part of that plan. So we want it to always be a specific question. So we don't just want to say, hey, are you ready to fix student debt in this country? And they say, yeah, sure. Okay, great. That's awesome that they want to fix student debt in this country. But that's not helping us move forward. So instead, you always want to ask them, whether it's, hey, can you sign this petition right now? Can you call your senator later today? Can you be at this event? Can we count on you to do this thing? Right? It's got to be a specific question. Another good tip is to start with smaller asks. So if you just meet someone at an event and you ask them, hey, do you want to run an event? That's probably not also going to be very successful because you're asking them to take on a lot of responsibility all at once. So they'll probably be a little bit scared. You know, they might be like, oh, I just showed up for the first time and now you want me to like do something all by myself. So you're not really setting them up for success. And you also don't know yet if this person is ready to do that kind of stuff. So you can figure out what asks are appropriate for your organization or for your campaign. But, you know, it's always good to kind of start a little bit smaller, start by giving them support. So, you know, if you want them to help you run an event, say, hey, will you work with me to put on this, I don't know, this talent show or this fundraiser or whatever. And then when you see that they've done that successfully, then you can work your way up. And then maybe the next time you say, okay, great, like now can you run one of these on your own? But it's always good to start a little bit smaller and then work your way up because then they feel empowered by success. You can see that they've taken this responsibility on and run with it. And it helps build people's confidence up, you know, when they do things well. So that's always a good time. And then, you know, the last thing about the question is you really want to set a timeline. So if sometimes it's something you can do immediately, right? You say, hey, can you sign this petition right now? Okay, well, that's easy. They signed the petition, right? You got their contact information, you can follow up. But if it's something else like calling your legislator or talking to someone else, you know, you want to set a timeline. So that way, again, they see that you're serious and you can give them a timeline that you can then follow up with. So if you say, okay, great, can you talk to, I don't know, the chair of your Democratic Central Committee for me? Well, if you just say, yeah, can you just do that sometime in the future? Well, you know, they might forget. They might not do it for another few weeks, whatever it may be. So you want to say, okay, do you think you'll talk to them like this weekend or maybe next week? Can you do it for me by next Wednesday? So if you give them a timeline, again, it sets in their mind a little bit more of a realistic goal. And they say, okay, great. So I know I have to do this by Wednesday. And then it also gives you a timeline so you can follow up and say, hey, how did that go? That conversation you had or that, you know, that event that you went to or whatever it is. So taking action is most effective when we give people a real plan. So if we just say, hey, go do this thing, it's probably not going to go very well. Whereas if we give people a real plan, a real way to do things, and a timeline in which to do that, it's going to be much more effective. And so you can determine what the ask is, what the action you need is, and then make sure you have a strong ask to do that. So that way, if you've got someone really riled up in that moment, you want to capitalize on that energy. Because as soon as they walk away, their mind is on other stuff, right? It happens to all of us. They are focused on what they have to make for dinner, what chores they have to do, right? So when they're in front of you having this conversation focused in that moment, that's the time where you're most likely going to be able to get them to do something, and you want to really capitalize on that. So really strong ask. So those are the 4 sections, and we're going to go through an example in a second. But does anyone have any questions about those last 2 sections or any thoughts?
They're very good. I guess I don't know if if I ask somebody to do something, I might be a little leery about the follow-up on it because it's something that I guess I've not really ever done. And especially if it's somebody that I don't know that well. Is there any hints on that?
Yeah, and so again, it totally depends on the role that you're in, but the way I like to do it is kind of make it casual in the moment. So for example, if I know someone, someone is going to talk to, I don't know, their boss for me, or they're going to connect me with someone, then I might say, oh, awesome, thank you, that's great that you're going to talk to so-and-so. would it be okay if I called you next week once you're done just to hear how it went? I'd love to, just get your take on the conversation. So if you kind of let people know in advance, like, oh yeah, I'm going to follow up with you because I want to hear how it went for you. I want to make sure everything was okay. That makes it sound a little less weird to folks. And then they're like, oh yeah, no, yeah, that makes total sense, right? That you want to talk to me again for this task that I'm going to do. And sometimes it's going to be different, right? Sometimes someone else will follow up with them. So then it might be good to say, oh, great, like we're going to have someone call you tomorrow to see how it went. But just kind of giving them that hint that, oh, yeah, we're going to talk to you again, is a great way to kind of put them at ease. And if you make it sound casual, they're going to think it's casual. You really set the tone for all of this. So if you're like, yep, this is totally normal, we follow up with everyone, it's great to keep momentum going, then they'll say, oh, yeah, you're right, that makes total sense. And then that's better than just sneak attack, and a week later you call them and you're like, hey, how did that thing go? And then they're like, what? Why are you calling me again? So I don't know if that helps at all.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing I will say that I have found to be the hardest part of this section, and just the organizing conversation in general, is getting over the idea that people are doing something for you. That someone is doing you a favor by taking this action, right? Because I know that this is something I struggle with all the time. I think, oh, I'm asking someone to do something and they did it, so they did it for me. And, we don't want to ask too much. We don't want to be pushy, right? But the reality is that's not actually what's happening. When we're asking someone to join us in the movement, especially after having this kind of conversation, we know that really they're doing it for themselves, right? When we talk about all of the issues we care about, ending gun violence or stopping climate change, you care about it, but chances are this person really cares about it too. And so when we ask them to join us, they're not doing it for you, they're doing it for themselves. And we're teaching people how to advocate for themselves, and we're giving them a path, and we're showing them we have this plan, but we all need to buy into this plan. And so when they do something, when they take a step, when they take an action, they're doing it for themselves. They're doing it to improve their own lives, their own situation. And so, again, this is something I still work through every day, the guilt of like, oh man, I asked someone to do something and it's a lot, and now I'm nervous, I asked them to do too much or whatever. But that's really what organizing is. It's teaching other people that they have the power to do this, and that's really what you're giving them. You're giving them the opportunity to take control of their power, and to really step up and do something for themselves. So, if we expect to make these large structural changes, we need everyone to understand that they need to be a part of it. So as much as possible, try and readjust your thinking sometimes to, oh, I'm not asking someone to do me a favor. I'm asking someone to do something for themselves. If you want to make change, you got to do it. And this is the way we're going to do it. So again, something I still struggle with every day. So now we're going to just recap real quick, kind of the sections we went over with an example. And this is an example of a completely fake organization and plan that I made up, but this is kind of an example to showcase. Let's say you just have 5 minutes, right? Let's say you're at, I don't know, a county fair or something. You have a table set up, advertising your issue, and someone walks up to you, right? So you introduce yourself, you say, hi, I'm Amelia, what's your name? Great. So we're going to be talking about student debt again. This is just the example I decided to run with. Maybe it's a little bit personal to me. But so you say, oh, great. Hi, Susan, nice to meet you. Do you have student debt? Oh man, that's really unfortunate to hear. How does your student debt impact your ability to plan for your future, right? So Susan tells us a little bit about her life. She says, oh yeah, I went to school 10 years ago, but I'm still paying it off. I actually have more debt now than I did when I started. She's talking. And so then you start to agitate and you say, why do you think students in this country are drowning in debt right now? And she talks about, her own experience and how college is so expensive, but she felt like she had to do it to build her future. And she's talking. And so she's like, yeah, student debt really sucks. And so then you say, yeah, you're right. And so I'm with Students for Progress, and we're organizing to pass a bill through Congress to erase student debt. And we've already got 30 senators who have committed to voting yes. And our goal is to get 10,000 constituents to call our senator to ask them to support this bill. So I've given Susan the plan. I'm like, we got this plan. 30 senators are already committed, which is huge. And our senator needs to commit. So that's why we're going to call this guy all the time. And then I ask Susan, I say, can you call our senator today to ask them to support this bill? So I know Susan cares about this. I've given her the plan, and I'm like, great, we need 10,000 people to call. Can you be one of those people to call? And so that's a great way, if you just have a really short amount of time, to still go through those different sections and kind of structure your conversation. So you have a plan from how to get to the introduction to Susan doing something. So again, you can tailor this to any context that you have. But this is a really brief one. Obviously, if you have a lot of time, right? If you can even do this with your family members or your neighbors, right? So if you have 2 hours, well, you can spend a lot of time hearing their story and hearing what they really care about. You can spend a lot of time asking them agitational questions. So don't ever be afraid to let the conversation go on. If someone wants to stand there and talk to you for an hour, if you've got an hour, obviously, but if you've got an hour and they aren't leaving and they're still talking to you, well, chances are that means they really care about these issues too and really want to do something. So don't ever be afraid to continue talking if someone doesn't seem like they're going away. And so if people are talking to you, take advantage of it and just, keep them talking, keep listening to them. Because the longer someone engages with you in a conversation, the more likely it is that they are caring about this conversation, and the more likely it is that they're going to do something. So, I know I always struggle again with that too, and I'm always like, oh, I'm taking up so much of this person's time, all of that. But trust me, if someone is fed up with the conversation or they want to get out of there, they'll let you know. They'll let you know with their body language, with their tone, that they are not feeling this. But so if someone is really just staying and talking, take that opportunity, because that doesn't always happen all the time. So just to go over some of the tips I went over real quick. These are kind of the buzz tips, the buzzwords that I like to always remember, and this applies for the whole conversation. The first is always choose open-ended questions. If you have a question that can be answered with a yes or no, try and rephrase it. Think about how to ask that question in a different way that will get someone talking. So instead of saying, are you doing okay today? Yes, no. Say, how are you doing? Change it up to get them talking more. Clear, concise, concrete. That's a really, really huge one. Try and be as clear as possible. Try and be as concrete as possible. Really give people examples of what it is that you're trying to do, what the plan is, and keep it concise. I know I'm really bad at that. I love to talk, as you all have probably gathered from this training today. I can talk for a really long time, but when I go on for 10 minutes, then at the end people are like, wait, what was the question? I forget. So always try and keep things as clear, concise, and concrete as possible, because that also means that you're talking less and they are talking more, which again, we always want to be doing. We want them to be talking. And that was my next one. Do more listening and less talking. It's kind of counterintuitive. We think, hey, we're talking to someone about an important issue, so they should be talking all the time. But no, you want to be talking, or you want to be listening, and you want them to be talking. Because if they're talking, they're thinking about this issue, you're learning more about them, and that gives you an opportunity to move them forward, because you know what they care about, and you know how to motivate them forward. And no one is doing you a favor. That's the biggest one, and again, one I still struggle with. No one is doing you a favor by signing up to try and change climate change. I mean, yeah, I personally would love that, but they're helping themselves, and you are giving people the tool to advocate for themselves. You're giving them an opportunity to be a part of this plan and to take ownership and fight for the issues that they care about. So I know it's really hard, but just try to always remember, they're not doing it for you, they're doing it for themselves. So don't be afraid to ask people to take responsibility. Don't be afraid to ask people to step up, because they're stepping up for themselves. So those are kind of the tips that I always like. There's some really great ones with that guy that I mentioned earlier, Fred Ross. He was the labor organizer, and he's got this very famous set of axioms for organizers that I'm going to send along when I send out this video recording. I don't agree with all of them, but they're just kind of like short little snippets of different things, and I think they're really, really interesting, and it's like a 2-page document, and it just helps to sort of reframe your mind about what organizing is. So I'm going to send that out, but I think that's a really great one for just short little tips to remember. And, you know, definitely feel free to look up Fred Ross because he's a super cool guy. And so to kind of end this all off before I take some questions, I just went over how important it is to take action. So I would be remiss if I did not do that in my own training. So, you know, here are some examples of how to take action with Team Ellis. You know, the first, which you guys are all doing today, is, you know, you can continue on with our organizing training. We're going to have 4 more, and those are going to go into more of the technological stuff about how to kind of build strategies, run phone banks, do like a door knocking canvassing operation. So that's taking these tools and figuring out how we expand our reach through using technology and things like that. And if you really enjoyed the training today, please feel free to share with people you know. Tell them this one they can get a recording of. But we really want to expand this far and wide. So if you had a good time today, tell a friend. Put it on Facebook, whatever it is. But we are trying to really expand these. So feel free to let people know about this. The other one, the really big action that we are asking everyone to take, is to phone bank. So I know I've talked to many of you personally about phone banking. I know many of you guys have already participated in them. But this month we're going to be doing these county phone banks. So we're going to be having one for Jefferson County. We have one for St. Francis this Thursday. But this is going to be an opportunity for volunteers to talk to people in their county. So it builds that relationship. And then you can say, oh yeah, you live in Rolla, so do I. Oh, that's so funny. And then you might be able to know someone a little bit better. But the phone banks are really the biggest, most important thing we can do during quarantine. It's the way that we're able to talk to people the most, and have these conversations that we all just talked about, as opposed to, you know, text or an email. So phone banks are really so important. And you can go to ellisforcongress.com/phone bank. And again, if you're going to come to a phone bank, have an organizing conversation with your friend and ask them to come along, ask them to join you. Because the more people we have, the more people we're going to reach. There's 500,000 registered voters in the 8th district, and we have a lot of people to talk to. So the more volunteers we have, the faster we're going to be able to reach all of them. And then you may have seen this graphic, the Take 5 for Kathy, but that's got some other ways listed. So we got phone banking. You can share Facebook posts. We've got a letter writing campaign to kind of help save USPS, while also writing letters for Kathy. You know, you can always donate, and then again, attend this training series. So this is a graphic that's already on Facebook that you can totally share really, really easily and quickly. And that has a lot of ways that people can take action with Team Ellis. So that's all I have for today. Last, I just have, you know, an opportunity for people to ask questions or share any thoughts, if you would like. So I don't know if anyone has any final parting thoughts that they would like to share.
I just want to thank you, Amelia, for taking the time to do this training, because this is like the first, like, we don't get these kinds of trainings in SEMO or in the 8th, well, at least my portion of the 8th district. Like these it just doesn't happen. So thank you and the campaign for doing this, because it's so important. Like, these are skills that I think that especially urban organizers take for granted. And so really for our community organizers that are on this call, like, I think it's helpful even for me. Like, I learned things too, even though I've been organizing. So thank you for doing this.
I'm so glad to hear that. That makes my heart happy. Thank you for saying that, Erin. And yeah, and I feel really lucky because I know everyone on this call is already an organizer, whether you would call yourself that or not. I think of you all as organizers. And I know you all have done really amazing work. But it is sometimes hard. You're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I'm, you know, whatever. So I know that I learned this through some of the work experience that I've got, but otherwise it's really hard to get some of these lessons. So, you know, hopefully you all learned something new. I do see a question from Helen in the chat, about phone banking. So you don't need any training to phone bank on any of these things. If you've done it for any other candidate, you're probably already a pro. We use the virtual phone banking tool with Van. So basically you just go to a website and there'll be a script that you read through, and you know, there'll be some questions that you can fill out, yes or no, depending on the call. But basically you just read through that script and it's going to give you all the information you need. You will be using your own phone, and I know some people have been a little concerned about privacy, or they're just like, I don't want to use my phone number. So we also do have information about setting up a Google Voice number, which can mask your own phone number. So if you want any information on that, feel free to send me an email. But yeah, it's a pretty easy procedure. It'll just be a screen on your computer. You'll have your phone. You'll dial the number, and if someone picks up, just follow the script and go through it. So yeah, if you've done it for any presidential candidate or any candidate at all, you should already be a pro. And yeah, it's pretty easy. And we do kick off all of our phone banks with like a 10-minute Zoom call or Blue Jeans. Sorry, we're not using Zoom, so I have to change my language. But we kick it off with like a 10-minute Blue Jeans call so volunteers can see each other, and we can give any tips or things like that. And then, yeah, people phone bank for an hour. So it's a pretty painless process. And we've had a lot of success with it so far. We had Dennis McDonald, who many of you might know, do calls yesterday, and he said he talked to people who had no idea Kathy was running, no idea a Democrat was running, and they were like, yeah, we want more information. So already we're reaching voters, which is really awesome. Do we have any other questions? I am very impressed with myself. I kept it to an hour, so this is great.
Yeah. There's a couple of meetings that I cannot be at, so how will I find out what was done or said on those meetings?
Yep. So if you have signed up for these, we will send you all of the recordings. So, you don't have to worry about it. We'll send you an email and it'll be a video with basically exactly what we did today. So even if you can't make all of them, you will still get the video via email, either on Tuesday night or on Wednesday after the training.
Okay. Because like I said, there are two of them that I can't attend. One of them is on June 2nd. That's election day. And I'm not sure if we're all can do elections by mail or not, but my husband and I, we work the polls on that day. So that one we definitely would not be able to attend. So I would like to get the video of your meeting.
Yeah, for sure. So we will definitely be sending that out. And I think we're all eager to see if there's going to be any changes to election day procedures as a result of this. Hopefully we get more mail ballots and things like that. We get that to be allowed. So so that's great. But so we'll be sending them all out, and so you'll get a video, and hopefully we won't have any issues with that. So are there any other questions? Awesome.
No, but I did want to say this was all very informative, and I thank you very much.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad this is my first time doing anything like this as well. So we are all learning together, and I'm glad that hopefully you all learned a little bit of something today. And it's been a pleasure having you all on the call. I'm glad it went smoothly, and thank you all for being here. This has really been such a pleasure. So if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to end the call. And like I said, you guys will all be getting an email with us shortly, and feel free to share. Send it along to your friends. The further and wider we spread the message, the better it is. So, yeah, thank you so much for being here, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. And we will hopefully see you all soon. Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.